For the tale I bring to you is one that will make your hearts beat like talking drums in the dead of night. It is a story that began many harvests ago, when the iroko trees were younger, and the gods walked more freely among men. This is the tale of the cursed heirs of Moro and Bende, two kingdoms bound by hatred and destiny. In the western lands, where the sun sets with the color of palm oil, stood the mighty kingdom of Moro. The kingdom's walls, built with the red earth of our ancestors, rose high into the sky like the proud chest of a warrior. At its heart sat the palace of King Oho, a structure that spoke of power through its very stones. King Oho was not always king. In his youth, he was known as Oho the Fierce, a warrior whose name made brave men tremble in their obi. They say he once fought 3 lions with nothing but a spear and his courage. Whether this was true, none dared to question, for his prowess in battle was beyond dispute. "Kabiesi," spoke Baba Ademola one morning. His ancient frame bent with the weight of his years of service as the king's chief advisor. The old man's white beard caught the early morning light as he bowed before the throne. The traders bring troubling news from the east. King Oho sat upon his throne, his massive frame adorned with the finest traditional robes woven with gold thread. The tribal marks on his face, 3 deep lines on each cheek, seemed to deepen as he frowned. "Speak, old friend. What news does the wind carry from Bende?" "King Samuel has been gathering allies among the coastal kingdoms. They say he offers them trade routes and gold, building his strength not through warfare, but through cunning." The king's laugh boomed through the palace halls, making the young guards jump. "Ha ha ha! Let that fox Samuel play his games. The strength of Moro lies not in clever words, but in the hearts and arms of its warriors." He stood, his 6'4" frame casting a long shadow across the palace floor. "Have I not defeated their armies thrice? Did I not send their warriors home, crying to their mothers?" Queen Bisola, who had been quietly observing from her throne beside her husband, spoke in a voice that carried the softness of shea butter but the strength of iron wood. "My king, perhaps we should not dismiss Samuel's methods so quickly. The cobra's bite kills as surely as the lion's jaw." The queen's beauty had not diminished with the years. Her skin, smooth as polished ebony, glowed in the morning light that streamed through the palace windows. The red coral beads around her neck clicked softly as she moved, a sound that had become synonymous with wisdom in the palace halls. "Ah, my love," King Oho's voice softened as he turned to his wife. "You always counsel caution. But remember, it was not caution that won us the Battle of Odo River, nor was it caution that expanded our kingdom to the western seas." "No," Queen Bisola agreed. "But it was caution that kept us from falling into Samuel's trap at the Valley of Whispers 3 rains ago." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of singing from the palace courtyard. Princess Ronka's voice floated up to them, sweet as honey wine. The king and queen moved to the balcony, watching their daughter below as she entertained the palace children. Princess Ronk sat on a low stool, her wrapper arranged neatly around her legs, her hair braided in the latest style with cowries woven through the plaits. Around her sat a dozen children, their eyes wide with wonder as she told them stories. "And then," she said, her hands moving expressively, "the mighty hunter raised his staff to the sky, calling upon the ancestors for strength." "What happened next, princess?" asked little Folami, daughter of one of the palace guards. "Lightning struck the staff, turning it into a mighty spear of light. But that, my little ones, is a story for another day. Ronke's smile brightened the courtyard like morning sun through rain clouds. The king's heart swelled with pride, watching his daughter. In these moments, it was easy to forget the darkness that plagued their family, the curse that descended with the night. But as the sun began its descent, Queen Bisola's face grew taut with worry. She signaled to Mama Aduke, the princess's personal attendant, a stout woman who had served the royal family since before Ronke's birth. "It is time," the queen said softly. "Take her to her chambers." "Yes, my queen." Mama Aduke moved with practiced efficiency. "Princess, come. Let us prepare for evening prayers." The children protested as Ronke rose to leave, but she smiled and promised more stories tomorrow. Only those who knew her well could see the fear beginning to creep into her eyes as she glanced at the setting sun. In her chambers, the transformation began as it always did. First came the restlessness, then the muttering. "They're coming," Ronke whispered, pacing her room. "The shadows with teeth. They're always coming when the sun sleeps." Queen Bisola sat outside her daughter's chamber, listening to the increasing distress within. Tears rolled down her cheeks as the muttering turned to screams. "The spirits dance!" "They dance with knives. Make them stop! Make them stop!" The heavy wooden door shook as something crashed against it from within. The queen pressed her palms against the smooth wood as if she could reach through it and comfort her child. "What curse is this?" she whispered to the night. "What sin are we paying for?" In the palace kitchens, the servants whispered among themselves. "It's the souls of those King Oju killed," said Mama Folami, the head cook, as she stirred a pot of egusi soup. "They cannot rest, so they torment his child." "Shh," cautioned Baba Tunde, the elderly palace guardian. "Such words could cost you your head if the wrong ears hear them." But the whispers continued, spreading through the kingdom like oil on water. Some said the princess had been cursed by a jealous witch. Others claimed she had offended the river goddess by bathing in sacred waters. The truth remained as elusive as smoke in the wind. Meanwhile, in the eastern kingdom of Bende, where the sun first greets our land, a different kind of darkness held sway. The palace there was built of white stone that gleamed like bones in the sunlight, its architecture speaking more of cunning than of power. King Samuel, unlike his Western rival, was a man whose strength lay in his mind rather than his muscles. His frame was lean, his fingers long and elegant, like those of a master craftsman. But it was his eyes that commanded attention, sharp and calculating, missing nothing. "The reports from our Western spies, my king," said Chief Obiora, sliding a scroll across the polished wooden table in the king's private chamber. King Samuel's fingers drummed against the table as he read, a habit that had become familiar to his advisors. "So, Ojo continues to build his army. The fool thinks every problem can be solved with a spear." Queen Dera, who had been arranging flowers nearby, a hobby she maintained despite her royal status, spoke without turning. "And you think every problem can be solved with schemes, my husband? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between." The king smiled at his wife's words. Queen Dera had been his perfect match. Beautiful, yes, with her high cheekbones and graceful bearing. But it was her mind that had first attracted him. She could unravel political knots with the same ease that she arranged her flowers. "Speaking of problems that need solving," Chief Obiora ventured carefully, The latest healer has arrived from the northern kingdoms to see Prince Gozie. The king's drumming fingers stopped abruptly. His son's blindness was the one problem his clever mind had failed to solve. And what does this one promise? Miracle waters? Sacred herbs? Or perhaps the blessing of some unknown god? He brings a mixture of herbs gathered under the full moon, my king. He claims... King Samuel spat the word like a bitter cola nut. They all make claims. We have tried every healer from here to the great desert. We have spent fortunes on treatments and prayers. He stood, pacing the chamber in agitation. My son, my only heir, remains blind while charlatan after charlatan grows fat on our gold. My love, Queen Dara's voice cut through his anger like a cool breeze. Perhaps we should let Gozie decide if he wishes to see this healer. As if summoned by his mother's words, Prince Gozie appeared in the doorway. Despite his blindness, he moved with a grace that made many forget his affliction. Tall like his father, with his mother's gentle features, he carried himself with quiet dignity. I heard raised voices, he said, his unseeing eyes somehow finding his father's location perfectly. Another healer, I assume? Son. King Samuel's voice softened, as it always did when addressing Gozie. You need not submit yourself to more treatments, if you do not wish it. Gozie smiled, moving confidently to a chair. Father, I have accepted my blindness. Perhaps it is time you did as well. Accept. The king's voice rose again. Accept that my son, the future king of Bende, cannot see. Accept that no woman of noble birth will agree to marry a blind prince. Accept that our bloodline may end with you. Samuel! Queen Dara's sharp tone cut through his tirade. Enough. Gozie remained calm, his unseeing eyes focused somewhere in the middle distance. I may be blind, father, but I see things you do not. I hear the whispers of our people, feel the rhythm of our kingdom's heart. Perhaps that is worth more than physical sight. Before the king could respond, a servant burst into the chamber, forgetting protocol in his haste. My king! Elder Silvanus has arrived with news from the west. Ah, Elder Silvanus. Here we must speak of a man whose heart was as twisted as the ancient vine that grows around the forbidden iroko tree. He made his home in the village of Abata, which lay between the two kingdoms like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. Silvanus was neither tall nor short, neither handsome nor ugly. He was a man easy to overlook, which suited his purposes perfectly. His real power lay in his ability to be whatever either kingdom needed him to be at any moment. My humble greetings, great king of Bende. Silvanus bowed low, his simple robes hiding the fact that he had worn much finer ones while visiting King Oho the previous day. I bring interesting news from Moro. King Samuel leaned forward. Speak. It seems all is not well in Oho's palace. There are whispers about his daughter, the princess. Whispers? The king's eyes narrowed. What kind of whispers? Silvanus glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, though this was merely theatrical. He had already noted every person in the room and assessed their trustworthiness. They say she is touched by spirits, that when darkness falls, she becomes different. Different how? Mad, my king. They say she becomes mad with the setting of each sun. The chamber fell silent as this information settled. King Samuel's fingers resumed their drumming on the table. How interesting, he murmured. The mighty Oho's only heir cursed. Perhaps the gods have a sense of humor after all. My king, Queen Dara interjected. Let us not take pleasure in another's suffering, even if they are our enemy." But Gosset, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "This princess? Tell me more about her, Elder Sylvanus." The elder's eyes gleamed with interest. "Ah, young prince. They say that during the day, she is as normal as any maiden. Beautiful, they say, with a kind heart. It is only when night falls that the spirits claim her mind." Gossi nodded thoughtfully. "A curse of darkness, while I live in perpetual darkness." "Indeed, mother. Perhaps the gods do have a sense of humor." Meanwhile, deep in the forest that separated the two kingdoms, stood the ancient coven, home to the legendary white python. The massive snake, they say, was as old as the earth itself, its scales gleaming like moonlight on water. Its eyes held secrets older than mankind, and in them lay both curse and cure. Mama Adana, the oldest woman in Abata village, often spoke of the python to those who would listen. On this very evening, she sat outside her hut, her ancient voice carrying on the night wind. "The python sees all truths," she told the youngsters gathered around her. "In its eyes, you might find healing or madness, sight or blindness. But the price," she shook her head slowly, "the price is always more than you expect to pay." "Has anyone ever returned from seeking the python's help?" asked a young boy. "Some say no one who enters the python's coven ever returns," she replied. "Others say they return changed in ways that make death seem merciful. But who can say? The forest keeps its secrets well." As night fell fully, the kingdoms of Moro and Bende settled into their routines. In the west, Princess Ronke's screams echoed through the palace halls, while in the east, Prince Gossi sat in his darkness, thinking of a princess he had never met. And somewhere between them, Elder Sylvanus smiled in his sleep, dreaming of the chaos he could create with this knowledge. For in the games of kings and kingdoms, even curses could be turned to advantage by those clever enough to use them. But the white python in its coven paid no heed to the schemes of men. It waited, as it had waited for centuries, for those desperate enough or brave enough to seek its power. For the python knew what none of the mortals did, that the curses of the prince and princess were but two halves of a whole, and that their meeting would set in motion events that would shake both kingdoms to their foundations. "My people, the night is still young, and our tale continues. Pour more palm wine, for the story of our cursed heirs grows deeper like a river in the rainy season. Let me tell you of the day when fate played its hand, bringing together two souls marked by destiny. It began on a market day in Abata village, that small settlement that lay like a pearl between two oyster shells. The harmattan winds had just begun to soften, and the morning air carried the sweet scent of ripening mangoes. This was no ordinary market day, for it was the famous Ike market, which occurred only once every 8 days and drew traders from both kingdoms despite their enmity. Princess Ronke had begged her father for permission to attend, a request that caused great concern in the palace of Moro. "Absolutely not," King Oho thundered, his voice echoing off the palace walls. "My daughter, wandering in neutral territory. Samuel would love nothing more than to capture you for ransom." But Ronke, dressed in a beautiful Ada wrapper dyed in the royal blue of Moro, stood her ground. "Father, I cannot live my entire life behind these walls. The market ends well before sunset, and I will have guards with me." Queen Bisola, ever the voice of reason, placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "My love, perhaps this is what she needs." She has been so improved lately. Only 3 episodes this past moon cycle. The king's face softened slightly as he looked at his daughter. Indeed, she had shown improvement. The court Daibier had created a new mixture of herbs that seemed to help calm the night terrors, though it could not prevent them entirely. Very well, he conceded finally. But you will take Chief Ogundimu and 5 of our best guards, and you must return well before sunset. Meanwhile, in the palace of Bende, Prince Gosi was making a similar request. The Eke market? King Samuel stroked his chin thoughtfully. What business could a blind prince have at a market? Gosi stood tall, his unseeing eyes focused somewhere past his father's shoulder. I go not to see, father, but to listen. The market holds the pulse of both kingdoms. Where else can we learn so much about what our people truly think and need? Queen Dera, arranging healing herbs in her private chamber adjacent to the throne room, smiled at her son's wisdom. He has a point, my husband. Besides, the boy shouldn't be confined to the palace any more than necessary. The queen speaks wisdom, added Chief Obioras, who had grown fond of the young prince. I will personally accompany him with a guard detail. And so it was that both heirs found themselves in Abata on that fateful day, though neither knew of the other's presence. The market was in full swing, a riot of colours, sounds and smells that assaulted the senses. Princess Ronki moved through the crowd, her guards creating a respectful space around her. She wore a simple head tie that partially concealed her royal beads, trying to blend in with the market women. Princess, whispered Marmaduke, who had insisted on accompanying her. Perhaps we should not wander so far from the main square. But Ronke was enchanted by everything around her. The calls of the traders, the laughter of children, the haggling over prices. It was all so different from the formal atmosphere of the palace. Look, Marmaduke, she exclaimed, pointing to a stall selling rare herbs. Perhaps something there might help with my condition. At that very moment, Prince Gosi was approaching the same stall from the opposite direction. He had developed an interest in medicinal herbs, hoping to find something that might cure his blindness. Chief Obiora guided him carefully through the crowd, though Gosi navigated surprisingly well on his own, his other senses having grown sharp over the years. What happened next was either chance or destiny, depending on who tells the tale. Princess Ronk, reaching for a bunch of dried herbs, stumbled slightly on the uneven ground. As she regained her balance, she bumped into Prince Gozi, who had bent down to smell the same herbs. Oh, I'm so sorry, Ronke apologized, steadying herself. Gozi smiled, turning toward her voice. No harm done. These market crowds can be quite challenging to navigate, even for those who can see. Something in his voice made Ronke pause. It was gentle, cultured, unlike the rough market traders around them. You're blind? From birth, he replied simply. Though sometimes I think I see more than those with perfect vision. Their guards, recognizing each other's kingdom's colors, tensed visibly. Chief Ogundimu's hand moved to his sword hilt, while Chief Obiora stepped closer to his prince. But something remarkable was happening. Neither heir seemed to notice or care about the tension around them. What brings you to the herb seller's stall? Ronka asked, genuinely curious. Hope, I suppose, Gozi answered with a slight shrug. Though after years of trying every herb and remedy from here to the great desert, I'm beginning to think acceptance might be the better path. And you? I also seek remedies, she said softly, though for a different kind of darkness. Their conversation might have continued, but fate had other plans. Elder Sylvanus, ever present where trouble might brew, spotted the interaction from across the market. His eyes gleamed with opportunity as he recognized both heirs. Well, well, he muttered to himself, what an interesting development this is. He began moving through the crowd toward them, but before he could reach their location, a commotion broke out nearby. A trader's cart had overturned, spilling yams across the dusty ground. In the chaos that followed, Princess Ronk found herself separated from her guards. Panic began to rise in her throat. She knew she needed to return to familiar faces before the anxiety triggered an episode. But then she felt a gentle touch on her arm. "Stay calm," Gozi's voice came to her. "The crowd's movement suggests an open path to our left. Shall we?" Without questioning how a blind man could know this, Ronke allowed him to guide her away from the chaos. They found themselves in a quiet space behind a row of stalls, where the market's noise was muffled. "How did you do that?" she asked, amazed. Gozi smiled. "When you cannot see, you learn to read the world in different ways. The movement of air, the direction of sounds, the way people's footsteps change pattern. It all tells a story." "That's remarkable," Ronke said sincerely. "I wish I had such clarity when my own darkness comes." Something in her tone made Gozi tilt his head. "You speak as someone who knows what it means to live with a burden." For a moment, Ronke considered telling him everything. About the night terrors, the screaming, the shadows that plagued her mind. But before she could speak, their respective guards found them. "Princess," Chief Ogundimu's voice was sharp with concern. "We must leave immediately." "Prince Gosier," Chief Obior said simultaneously. "It isn't safe here." It was then that each realized who the other was. Their eyes widened in recognition, or in Gosi's case, his expression changed as he understood the significance of the title he'd heard. "You're King Oho's daughter," he said softly. "And you're King Samuel's son," she replied, a note of wonder in her voice. Their guards began pulling them in opposite directions, but both heirs resisted for a moment. "Will you come to the market again?" Gozi asked quickly. "In 8 days," Ronke replied without thinking. "When the Eke returns." And then they were separated, pulled back into their respective worlds of protocol and propriety. But something had changed. A seed had been planted that would grow into either salvation or destruction for both kingdoms. Elder Sylvanus, who had witnessed everything from the shadows, smiled to himself. "The blind prince and the mad princess," he mused. "Oh, what tales I could tell to both courts about this. For the right price, of course."
Write the word, continue in the comment section if you want the next part, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Kindly click the subscribe button, like, comment, and share this video. Watch out for more intriguing and eye-catching videos from your favorite YouTube channel.